Welcome to the TechCast Webinar Series under the theme of Foresight in Turbulent Times, looking for tools and ways to manage the change and risks that go along with those turbulent times. This is the series that we've done this spring, brings together top futurists, forecasters, and strategists, each with their own angle and contribution to make to the broad field, and each with some pretty interesting history that got them here as well. Part of what we're doing at TechCast and the community in the foresight world is to help people understand that in these turbulent times, these kinds of tools that give us a better insight and foresight can be very important to navigating in turbulent times. I'm Flynn Busey, and I'm glad to be here today with my host, Limor Schaffman, and I'm going to turn it over to Limor to introduce our speaker today in today's program. Limor?
Wonderful, Flynn. Thank you so much, and thank you all of you for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to be with you for our third in a row of this series, and we're very excited about this topic and the speaker that we have. So one of the things I want to make sure that you all know is that we want your questions. If you've joined us in the past, you already know this, but we are very proactive about bringing in your questions. So in the upper right-hand side, you're going to see that there's a questions area. Please type in your questions there. Over the course of the discussion, I'm going to try to weave them in as best I can and make sure that they get answered. So with us today, we have Jerry Glenn. He's the CEO and the co-founder of the Millennium Project. And what he's going to be talking about is why and how to create global collective intelligence about the future. A little bit more about his background, in addition to heading up and co-founding the Millennium Project. For the past 18 years, he has co-authored the State of the Future report with Ted Gordon and Elizabeth Florescu. He's editor of Futures Research Methodology 3.0 and creator of the Global Futures Intelligence System, which we'll be hearing about today. He invented the Futures Wheel, a futures assessment technique, and it is an absolute pleasure to have you, Jerry, with us. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So please, why don't you start us off by explaining to us what collective intelligence is all about?
Okay, I'll start off with that definition, but just to give your listeners an overview, I'm going to, after explaining what that is, a little bit about it, I'll give an example of a system and then some uses of this system, explain how it can be used in different governments like Egypt and the European Commission, and some other applications for businesses and universities as well. So that's sort of the overall idea. So what is collective intelligence and why use it? Collective intelligence has different definitions to different people. It's sort of like in the early days of artificial intelligence. You had different people giving different definitions, and today we have a whole slew of them. So here's my take on it. You can take a look at Wikipedia. It's one of the main definitions there. I see it not as a thing, like a book or averaging people's judgments together, but more as an ongoing emergent property. Just like your mind is an emergent property from your brain and what you ate and your genetics and all that sort of stuff, all that together is this emergent mind going on all the time. So collective intelligence, I see, as an emergent property continually from the interactions of basically three elements. One, human brains, experts and others with insights, hardware and software, and data, knowledge, and information. Now, if you go back to throughout history, when the king or the vizier wanted to get the wise ones together, they would have a discussion and then come up with an answer, and that's how they would get the, quote, collective intelligence at that time. Then along comes the internet, and people say, I don't need to do that. I just do my searches and put all this sort of stuff together, and that gets you the answer. Then the mathematician in the crowd goes, wait a minute, just give me your data. I'll put it into a model, and that'll give you the answer or the decision. Now, each of those have perfectly good roles to play. But imagine if you could interact those three things in a common platform, so it's totally interoperable, and every element within each of the three can change each other as an ongoing basis, so the collective intelligence continues to emerge. That's my view of collective intelligence. So for the academics in the crowd, it emerges from the interaction and synergies from data, knowledge, information, from software, hardware, experts, and others with insight that continually learns from feedback. to produce just-in-time knowledge for better decisions than these elements acting alone. So, why use it? We all know that change is going on at an incredible rate, and it's very hard to keep track of everything. This was the original way I got involved in it. There was some years ago, there was a meeting on the future of energy, what should be done. And one of the conclusions was politicians and mayors are making decisions on a daily basis about technology that's already been developed 5 or 10 years ago. They're bringing in solar panels into the mayor's office that are out of date. So how do these politicians, I mean, we futurists have a hard time keeping track of all this, and that's our full-time job. How can a politician who's not a full-time job futurist, how does he keep track? If he wants to get solar panels, well, what does he do to get the latest one that's about to come, because they may be purchasing it, a year from now, or budget a year from now. So how do they make sure they keep ahead of all this sort of stuff? So the group of these futurists looking at energy said we've got to have a collective intelligence system for energy. And then that led to the idea, well, we should have a collective intelligence for water, we should have a collective intelligence for all kinds of different things, including, of course, the future of the world. And that's where the Millennium Project came in to do it. So one of the reasons for doing it is just the acceleration of change. How do you keep track of all this sort of stuff? I mean, breakthroughs are happening every day somewhere around the world. Somebody's got a breakthrough in Moscow, and somebody's got a breakthrough in Buenos Aires. Well, then with a collective intelligence system, you can get those two breakthroughs into your system at the same time if you have a system to collect that and to do it. And just the sheer explosion of data and information, knowledge, and intelligence and wisdom is just overwhelming. The normal systems can't really keep up with that. We're all having information overload pretty seriously. And it's also complex information. So you need some interoperable common platform that can interrelate A and B rather than have a system for A and a system for B and a system for D and going back and forth. It's too difficult to do. So, and then you throw in everything. That's even more of an explosion of data. How can you possibly keep track of all of this? So we're already information overloaded, and it's going to increase. Current systems do not provide a sense of coherence. What does this all add up to? How do you get a sense of adding it up, adding up? For the next 25 years of changes, are going to make the last 25 years look slow because the factors that made those 25 years of change are accelerating themselves and are becoming more interdependent and more synergistic. So we've got one whopper of the future coming up. So the example that we're developed is the Global Futures Intelligence System. We did one of these, the first one we did for, 10 years or so ago, for the Kuwait Oil Company. Well, that was an internal one that unfortunately the public's doesn't have access to. And we did one for climate change in Korea, and then helped universities put together a system as well to integrate their university systems. And now we're doing this one. This system, and they can all be done differently, of course, but this system has, if you look on the left-hand corner of the slide there and go down a little bit, where it says sections of the Global Future System. One is 15 Global Challenges. 15 Global Challenges is a way to organize global information to provide coherence. How do we understand the change of the world as a whole? Well, one way to do that is that what are the key challenges of the whole thing, put them in an interoperable way. Then we have this, below that is research. That's all the content about these sort of things, and there's all sorts of people as well. And then what are the methods below that? And across the top, above the three little earths there, where it says Home, FAQs, Participate. Participate allows you to create a group immediately, so that if you're doing some work and you say, oh my God, we really got to figure out X, you can very on the fly create a listserv, essentially, or group, and then it has various capabilities of searching and use the whole system. Then it also allows you to create a real-time Delphi to do a more sophisticated sort of analysis and collection of information around the world. I'll explain that in a little bit. The Interact allows you to do a video conferencing thing, and the Update gives you all the recent edits in the system. And then down back over to the left-hand side, going down to the bottom there where it says Results, System-Wide Reviews. There's a bunch of stuff going off the screen there, so that tells you what's happened since the last time you looked at it. So right now on this one, it says, where it says below questions, it says scanning items 10 or so. So that's telling you, so the last time you looked at scanning items, 10 new ones have come in. So this way you don't have to, if there's, where there's zeros, you don't have to look at something. So it allows you to keep track quickly of what's changed in the whole system on a daily basis. Now let's take one example of the challenges. This is challenge 1 on sustainable development and climate change. Each challenge, whether it's challenge 1, 2, 3, or up to 15, has the exact same menu. So if you look in the center of your screen there where it says situation, report, digest, edit, scans, news, comments, models, resources, books, papers, questions, and data. This is a way to organize information about that question of how do we create sustainable development. Now this one right now is highlighting report. Now in the report, anybody can get where it says premium, there it says free. Anybody can come into the system, which is the MP, THEMP, the MP.org. They can go into that. You can go to that right now if you want to. And then you don't even have to sign in. You just go to challenge 1 and then click on a short overview, and you get the overview. This thing, this is what a bunch of people around the world for all kinds of processes said. Here's your 3 pages or so of what's important, the most important stuff to know about that question. And then that's the same for question 2, 3, 4, and so forth. Then, if one wants further detail, it's all down there. That's like several hundred pages of stuff. So here's what the menus sort of look like. One is a situation chart. This is something I would like people to take seriously in the academic world, as well as the business world. The business world sort of appreciates this, but the idea, if you know something, whether it's knowing your market, knowing your product, whatever it happens to be, if you know something, you should know what are the most important things to know about the current situation. What is it? Like if you're doing climate change, for example, do you have to know about parts per million? Do you have to know about water temperature? What are the most important things to know about something right now? And what's the desired situation? And then what are the policies to address the gap between what is and what ought? I think it's an obvious thing, but take a look at books on the future. Take a look at university courses. Take a look around. You don't really see information organized in what is, what ought, how do you address the gap. It's a very simple formulation, but we don't see that. So anyway, each of these questions have that as a menu option to understand it. Then the report I already explained. News items is an interesting idea. Right now we have RSS feeds, and we have Google Alerts. We have a variety of mechanisms that we all use that you go to, or it goes to you, either way. But it's not integrated into one spot that you can search. What we've done is we create what's called a news aggregator, so we can go to the best RSS feeds, the best press releases, whatever people think are the best, put those into one location, which of course gives you too much news to read. Then what you do is you search. So if I was doing, let's say, climate change, I might then go to news, and of course there'd be 1,000 items there in one day, which you can't possibly read. But I might put in Bangladesh, so I can know what happened today about Bangladesh and the best news sources on that question. And that saves a tremendous amount of time. So you don't have to look through tons of emails to get stuff. You just go to one spot. And then if something is important in that news, the person can copy that into the longer-term memory. This is scanning. So think of like your brain as being short-term memory and long-term memory. So the short-term memory would be the news, and the long-term memory would be scanning. So the scanning items are actually annotated and analyzed. So that's actually value added, whereas the news are just pouring in. And then the fifth item on the list is an ongoing Delphi, so that you can add questions at any given time. And when they have answers coming out, then they can come back out. This is an innovation, by the way. Let me pause here a second. For those of you that are aware of futures methodology, one of the classics is called the Delphi. This is a questionnaire created by the RAND Corporation to figure out how to forecast future weapons and figure out what to do about preventing World War III and so forth. And there's a lot of generals and admirals that you might want to have around the table to discuss it, but they don't always go to the same place at the same time. And, we're human beings, we have egos, and because Joe said it, I disagree with it. Because Sam said it, or Sally said it, I agree with it. And that's sort of silly, unfortunately. So the Delphi allows all the information to come into a questionnaire. Unlike previous ones, it takes those results and makes a new questionnaire, so that people have to respond to the ideas of others without knowing who said it. So there's through your anonymous stuff. So the ideas become persuasive, not personalities or ranks or divisions or ideologies. So that, and then you take the results of that questionnaire, and then you make a third questionnaire, so that you tend to move toward consensus of intelligent thinking. This is still useful. It's great. It's excellent if done well, but it does take time, because that can take 6 months to a year to do right. So let's say you're in a hurry. So you can instead you would develop what's called Real-Time Delphi with Ted Gordon, co-founder of the Millennium Project, and also part of the early team at Rand Corporation developing the Delphi to begin with. Said, okay, what we can do is we can send out a Delphi like we normally would, except you say, by this time tomorrow, or this time next week, whatever the results are, that's the results going to the president, or that's the results going to the secretary general, or to whoever the decision maker is, so that a person can come in, put in their responses, their ideas, their ratings, whatever they want to do, and then come back 6 hours later, the next day, or they can get interrupted by a phone call, sign out, come back in. And then, but the difference here is whatever a person puts in is in real time. You can see what, you don't have to wait to the next round. You can see what other people are putting in as they're putting it in, which then allows you to say, oh, that's a misunderstanding. I better change what I wrote so that people don't misunderstand what I said, so that you're having a controlled discussion in sort of asynchronous time with a deadline, so that out can come your Delphi study in a day, a week, a month, instead of like a year in the previous ones. So the third iteration of Delphi, we don't really have a name for it, we may call it the GFS, Delphi, Global Future System Delphi. The idea is that you create a question when you're ready to ask it. And when there's enough answers, you take it out and put it into the situation chart or put it in the report when it's ready. Now, I've done a lot of Delphis over the years, and it's clear that there's a point at which in a Delphi questionnaire that there's no real new information. So it doesn't matter if you have another 1,000 people. The numbers will be about the same, and the content's about the same. So there's no really new. You don't necessarily know when you're going to hit that, but anybody that's done these things knows there's a point where it is hit. So this third version of the Delphi, the Global Future System Delphi, you can add a question whenever it's ready, and you can tailor it, including demographics. In the normal Delphi process and the real-time Delphi process, it's the same demographic questions. You know, what's your experience with artificial intelligence? What's your experience with futures research? What country are you in? You know, what academic thing are you in? Whatever. Those demographic questions are not equally valuable to all questions. So in this system, you can create demographics for each individual question. And you can enter them whenever you want to, and then again, take them out when you want to. So it's like it's an ongoing system. That's quite unique. We haven't written this up yet, and I haven't really activated it much yet, but it's in the software. Then you've got public comments. One of the things we've added in here is anywhere in the system, whether it's research, methods, challenges, research groups, Delphis, whatever it is, the lower left-hand corner is a little icon for comments. So anybody can comment on anything. So then within that category, you click on the menu option, comments, and you see everybody's comments. And you can comment on the comments. So it's sort of like an ad hoc conversation that can get created easily this way. And then there's different discussion groups that get created, what best computer models. When I say computer models, I mean 3 kinds. One, mathematical model, conceptual model, and rules-based models or agent-based models. Resources primarily, what are the best websites, books, and papers, and so forth. And updates tells you all the edits, and digest gives you an executive overview of the challenge as well. So that's basically how we structure it. Now, this could be done for anything. You could do it for a university. Let's say if George Washington University says, we want to address climate change. Okay, so how do we get a whole of university response to that? You can stick something like this onto your website and pull all the universities thinking together. This is what a situation first cut, when a situation chart looks like. Obviously, all those blue things you can click in and get more details. But part of the idea here is to engage people to say, if you know sustainable development, climate change, what is it that you should know about the current situation? Is it parts per million? Is it gases? Is it ocean acidity? What is it? What's the most important? And those things can change at any point. We can right-click on it. We can change those titles. We can move them around. So it's a very flexible system. Same thing with desired situation and policies. So use of real-time Delphi software in the system. So that someone can go in the system, click on participate, click on real-time Delphi, click on Initiate a Delphi, and they'll begin to create their own Delphi, and then invite people to participate to it. So you ad hoc create little collective intelligence systems very on the fly. This is what they look like when, for example, one of them. Here in the upper left-hand corner, well, let's see the top, says real-time Delphi software and GFIS to gather expert opinion and dialogue. Okay, question number 1. It says degradation of urban, rural, coastal ecosystems for Africa and Asia. This is a study we did for the Rockefeller Foundation because they want to open up a new funding category here. So in this questionnaire, you'll notice at the left-hand corner we have 2 web links so that we put in there what we think are the best research or best information about that question now. So at least we don't get somebody coming back giving us what's already known. That's the idea, so let's get up to date with this stuff. Then the next one is a slider using to rate things like this. And it also it tells you how many people have participated and so forth. And then below you'll see there where it says discussion. We not only want people to rate things, we want them to tell us why. Because one person's 3 may be as important as another person's 4, but you really don't know what it necessarily means. It's easy to have the numbers. It looks good. We use the graphs. But you really want to know what's going on in a person's mind about this as well. So we collect a lot of information. We just finished a Delphi a couple of days ago on artificial intelligence and future work. And we collected 1,000 content comments, many thousand numeric answers, but the content one, which is, a couple hundred pages of stuff to go through. It's onerous, difficult to analyze, but it's far more valuable than just getting the numbers. And also sometimes we ask people to not only say what's the comment about why they explained the answer, but what do they think about that, their answer, to explain that further. So this is an example of where you can use software to integrate various minds around the place, and then the outputs of this goes into the system. And then you can do the normal sort of displays in real time. This is a question of ethics. Some people say you shouldn't let people know what's going on like this during a Delphi, because then if somebody wants it to be 10 rather than 5, and they put in 8 before, then they can change their number to mess with the number. So there's some ethics on this question. The jury is out on this. What's the best way to collect judgment without influencing others? One of the ways we address this sometimes is to change the order of the questions. So because obviously the first question gets answered more than the last question. There's various ways to do that. You can just have a number generator and they come out that way. The other way is you say from somebody from A to M, you get this questionnaire, and from M to Z, you get that questionnaire. There's several ways of doing it. It's a good idea, and it makes it a little more ethical. This is the one that I just mentioned. It's just finished up. It's an extraordinarily interesting study, and we will have it available soon in the global collective intelligence system here. But just give you a preview of coming attractions is, in general, people working on AI clearly see the impact of it, that the general experts, unless it's social sciences and software sciences, really haven't come to grips with yet, especially how the integration of synthetic biology and artificial intelligence. That integration, people are unaware of what a big impact this was going to be. But regardless of what people thought, there was a general sense that by 2050, the whole concept of work, unemployment, and employment, and jobs will be so strikingly different today that we really have to talk about new economic systems. And that's a big bombshell coming up. Okay, so how do you use this in other places?
Jerry.
Yes.
Let me. You've covered a lot of material, and a lot of it's interesting. I want to slow down. We do, I think, have a couple questions coming up in the audience, but also, I also want to just ask a quick, background question about how this sort of, just a quick scenario of how this evolved to this point, and kind of where you see your project, going.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, our first one was for the Kuwait Oil Company. We'd also did one for the Prime Minister's office, but again, those are like underneath their firewalls, so people can't see those. But we did them so that we would learn how to do them, so to speak. What I'm hoping that what reasons we did this one the Global Future System is because people didn't always get it right, or it wasn't publicly available, because I think we all here believe that we want an educated world public, not just elite intelligence systems for the current elites. We've got to include the world as much as possible. So we're now laying the foundations. If all goes well, what I just showed you will look antique in a couple of years.
That's kind of one of the questions is kind of forecasting, this tool specifically, but the ability to get the kind of collective intelligence seems to me to be one of those driving factors that can be used in a way to reflect upon itself.
Well, one of the evolutions we're beginning to do now, coming attractions folks, is if you do a search, you'll notice sometimes you have an option to go between reviewer and the public. The reason for this is for each of those 15 challenges, we're in the process of putting together reviewers. And we'd like to have at least 100 reviewers or more for every challenge. And we have that for a bunch of them right now. We're a little weak on organized crime. We can use some more people. Experts on organized crime. That's not the most popular topic we deal with, but it's probably one of the most important. In any case, so the idea is that we have an upper left-hand corner in the front page, a little thing saying alerts. So let's say you're a reviewer for Challenge 5. And I'm John Q. Public, and I come in and I see something, and I say, that's cool, but here's a suggested edit or a change to it or a better website or whatever. All right? Now, I'm not vetted. I don't know who I am. So it goes into the file for the reviewers of that challenge or that issue. So when they come on the system, the little alert will say alert-1. They click on that, and up comes the suggested edit or change or comment. I then, as a reviewer, can say, I accept it, and then modify what it is, because maybe the grammar wasn't great, because we're working with people from different languages, and then it goes. But then 2 other reviewers have to do a similar sort of a thing, say, okay. So it's like, and then I can also send an email directly to the person who made the comment, because I could say, I've turned this down because there's a misunderstanding between A, B, and C. If you can clarify that, then we can add it in. So you're creating what professional peer reviews have today for journals, but we want to get a 24-hour turnaround. For example, I just got an article, review of last year's State of the Future report. It's going to come out several months in the Futures Journal. Well, we're going to create the next State of the Futures in print before the review of last year's comes out. So professional journals are great, but they're slow. So, but they have the advantage of really, scrubbing over the information. So this way, we can, the new version of the collective intelligence system is have a peer review system, international peer review system, and granularity, so that you can even edit the suggestions with the person, so that we can have quality control of the reviewer information. Now, the public also has stuff to say, or not necessarily hotshots. So you can hit the public stuff, so you can see the public input, and you can see the reviewer inputs. That's one of the evolutions we will do. If all goes well, we end up with enough paid subscriptions, or maybe somebody gives us a grant, so that this becomes much more accessible to most people. But all the executive summaries in the system are now available to them if they want. Another thing we would like to do on innovation is have doing a little bit with Watson. IBM's Watson, as you know, is natural language, and it beat the contestants in Jeopardy. I think everybody knows that. We're in a process of talking with IBM and via the National Science Foundation to do a control experiment. I just mentioned this study we did on artificial intelligence and work. What we're thinking about doing is giving all this information, main information question, to Watson. So that Watson understands it all. And then we feed Watson the same real-time Delphi that we did with human beings. So it's like a control experiment. How would Watson do on this questionnaire versus all these 400 hotshots? Be interesting. And then from that, we might be able to integrate more and more Watson activity with this, so that this evolves with artificial intelligence systems through time. So that's a little bit of the direction of next steps.
Very interesting. And I'm actually wondering if that means, do you think that that the combination they would make use, can they extract your algorithms and actually make use of them in artificial intelligence? Is that something that, is that what you mean, Jerry? Is that where you're going?
Well, I was thinking the other way around. I think the artificial intelligence people are way ahead of me on the algorithms. So it's more like how we could integrate artificial intelligence into our system. However, quid pro quo, any of these people will get access to all of our systems as well. Yeah, so we're like the people side and the information side. We have, as you saw, some software side, but they've got superior artificial intelligence than we do.
Right.
So we'd like to close that loop if possible.
Wonderful. So I have a couple of questions here from the audience. The first one is a two-part question. When compiling the State of the Future reports, part number one, how do you filter the information and intelligence for the reports? And then number two, how does the system overcome information bias?
Good. If I don't get I'll answer the bias one right off the bat. We're probably more accepting and international by far than any such system or futures group. We have 56 nodes around the world. Each of these nodes are supposed to be, they're not all perfect. So you have some from government, some from universities, some from NGOs, some from international organization systems, some from businesses. So when the question goes out, who knows the most about AI and work, the business community recommends the business hotshots, and the university people recommend the university hotshots. So by having a trans-institutional node, so to speak, you're cutting across some of those institutional biases. The cultural biases you cut across because you got these things at 56 locations around the world, which includes Tehran and Tel Aviv, by the way. So we are not perfect, but we certainly have more, in a sense, counterbalancing of prejudices by integrating so many different. I mean, I don't think anybody's kind of close to the broad influence this system that exists. Now, on the first one, how do we do it? Actually, the Global Futures Intelligence System now is an active partner in our preparing the state of the future. For example, you saw that menu option. There's 11 elements to it. I can take a look and say, gee, what happened in Egypt on this situation? In the news section, search it and get something very fast. So it's helping me and the other writers of this thing update and improve stuff because we're using this system all the time, every day. So whereas the book, the print book, is like once a year. It's a static object. Whereas the collective intelligence system is on. It's a better deal than the book, by the way, folks. We still do the book. So we're using the system to improve the book. But the system also has reviewers. So I can send draft. There's a capability in there that I have, such that, let's say, challenge one, I say, who are all the reviewers of challenge one? Up comes a list. And I can say, okay, send an email to all these people with this text. And then they can have at it. So very quickly, I can, with very little work, have a whole lot of nitpickers all over the place going through this sort of system.
So we have another follow-on that is perfect. How have the nodes changed over the past several years? If they've changed.
Yeah, there are more. If you take a look at NAR, I mean, we grow, I don't know, about 5 nodes or something like that or more a year. We don't recruit them, by the way. This is a point about management. If you recruit somebody, you've got to manage them. If they come knocking on your door, you don't have to manage them as much. This is not an easy project to manage, as you can probably suspect. So what people have to do, they say they knock on the door, so to speak, and I say, okay, now what you have to do is it's not just your party, or it's not just your university, or it's not just you. A node is like this little mini opera. You want a violin, you want a trumpet, you want a songwriter, you want a singer, you want, it's a combination. That stops people right off the bat because they realize, oh, I can't, this isn't just for me to put underneath my arm and we walk around as a hotshot. That's not the idea. So that filters out people quite quickly. And then it usually takes them around 6 months to a year to get that mix together. When they get that mix together, then they say, okay, here's the mix. Then we sign a memorandum of understanding, and then it goes from there. How have they changed over the years? There's just more of them. The concept's very much the same as from the very beginning. We did, I don't know, people may not know this, we did a 3-year, repeat, 3-year feasibility study before we began. And we did a 1-year pre-feasibility study before we did the feasibility study. So there's a long process of how to put this. The concept began during the Cold War, a tricky time to do a global think tank. And so during that feasibility phase, I think one of the reps from Moscow said, hey, if this thing goes, I want to be your person in Moscow. And somebody else says, hey, if you're going to do artificial intelligence, I want to do your artificial intelligence part. So people started popping up around saying, hey, we really want to get involved in this sort of thing for real, not just be recipients of an annual report. So the concept of a node is like an intersection of 2 or more networks, which is more powerful than just a network. A network of like-minded people, whereas a node is an intersection of different nodes. That makes it a richer combination. So then that's how the concept sort of came about through the feasibility study, and we began with just 4 nodes, and now it's 56. So it keeps growing.
And so, one of the comments that I have here is that the nodes have also become better. One of your listeners here is saying that, and actively contributing and pushing regional initiatives, which seems to be so very proactive on a local level.
Good. Good. I can tell I left off a very important point. I got to correct myself now. Yes, one thing that happened last year was the European nodes, or a couple of years ago, the European nodes were also in something called the European Foresight College. These were mostly academic folks. Not all of our nodes are academic. They're some of the think tanks and consulting groups and so forth. Hosted. By the way, a node has to have some institutional host. You know, like different players, but so the host can be a university, a host can be a government, a host can be, anything. There has to be something that's going to answer the email, so to speak. Now, so the European nodes together, plus this Foresight College, merged about a couple of years ago, and now have become what's called Foresight Europe Network. That's now a region. It's not exactly a node because they're a sort of super node in a sense. They're like they're networks. There are different opinions on which fall. So we'll have nodes, individuals, and the network. So there's a European network of nodes plus things that are not necessarily the Millennium Project. Same thing with Latin America. It's called REBER. It's the Latin American system of the Latin American nodes and others as well, all together into a network called REBER. So now there are 2 regional systems like that, which was our original idea. We didn't want to do individual countries because it was going to be just massively complex, which it is. But then in the first regional one was in Buenos Aires, but then when Brazil wanted to come in, I couldn't ask Brazil to be underneath Argentina. That wouldn't work. So he said, okay, we'll go to national nodes, and that's how it's. So now it's evolving back maybe to regionalization system, which would be fine if it works out. We'll see.
Understood. And actually, the comment came from a woman, Cornelia Daheim, from Future Impacts from the German node. So
correct,
you're right. It was
correct. So she was getting me to say, hey, Jerry, you forgot about the European Foresight Network. Okay, I've been corrected. That's goes to the feedback. You're asking about how do we make sure we're not too much bias. We all have biases. Nobody's perfect. But you got to respond to feedback. If you just get feedback, information overload. So we've got to respond to it to make it smarter.
So this is a perfect example of it. Fantastic.
Yep.
Great. So we have another question here. And actually, so Jerry, let me ask you, do you want to continue a little bit further and then me ask the question? Should I just go in and dive into this next question here from the audience?
I'm at your service.
Okay.
Either way.
All right. Well, let me just ask this since we're getting great feedback. It sounds like data-based indicators are largely represented in the situation, in quotation marks, section of each challenge. Are the indicators that you're watching normalized in some way?
Yes.
Can they be recontextualized alongside indicators for other challenges?
Yeah, who asked that question?
Camille Hartzell.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know her. So fair enough. That wasn't a. We do that. Several quickly. When we had the first set of 15, we said, okay, how do we measure progress or regress? And we got, I don't know, hundreds of indicators. But a lot of the like, an indicator might be something that people want, like people being happier. Okay, fine. Well, how do we measure happier? A lot of controversy. So out of all those suggestions, it boiled down to about 19 indicators. And then slowly it's gotten up to about 28, 29, 30, depending on the year and depending on the availability of data. So that's how it evolved. It evolved from a questionnaire around the world, Delphi asking, how do we measure this sort of stuff, pulling that together, and then seeing if the data was available and reliable from year after year, because you can't have it reliable one year and not reliable the next year. You can't use it. Okay, so now we're up to about 28, 29 variables depending on the year. Now, how do we normalize it? The way we normalize it is the following. The non-mathematician normalize it is how you can add apples and oranges and make sense. So obviously water and health are not the same thing. So how do you make that in common to come up with an index? The way we do it is the index, the state of the future index, is simply an index of improvement or non-improvement. So every indicator is asked that way. We send out a Delphi to participants to the nodes, and the nodes then invite people around the world. That's how one of the things the nodes do is they pick the people in their region because we won't know ourselves who's the best. Now, then they say, the node will say, okay, here's 20 years of data on this variable. What's the best possible this could be in 10 years? And what's the worst possible in 10 years? So we average the responses of the worst and the average responses of the best, and that's a number, both numbers. So that's a number above and below, most likely, the projection of the next 10 years. So you take your 20 years of data and you just project it between what's good and bad. So that's then becomes like 0.4 to good or 0.6 to good or whatever. So then you add all those together, like how much good is going on, into a single index. Now, we can also sometimes ask for weighting because some of them are more important than others. So that's how we normalize the data into a unified index.
Wonderful. And just so you know, Camille wanted to share with you that she is the research librarian for writer Kevin Kelly, the co-founding editor of Wired Magazine. So
Kevin, actually, I want you to do me a favor. Kevin, I went to his house after some hurricane. There was trees all over the joint a bunch of years ago, and he was going to do an article about, is there an official future? And he thought that we were the official future. And I said, no, I was arguing against it. We didn't have the State of the Future Index at that point, because that came up in 1999 or 2000. So this is Kevin before that. And I did not have a good answer. And I said, you shouldn't do it an official future, because then you get self-fulfilling prophecy. Then everything moves to the middle of the average, which is not cool. Now we've got a State of the Future Index. The State of the Future Index is a 10-year index and that sort of stuff. We could say that that's not exactly the official future, but now it's a candidate, I would say. So if you're talking to Kevin and you want to revisit that, you can check out the State of the Future Index, and I'll cooperate if he wants.
Yeah, and Camille just wrote that is exactly what they're working on, and they're revisiting the concept. So okay. it sounds like you guys should reconnect. So, Jerry, we have another question that is a perfect lead-in, I think, to the next part of your presentation. How would you assess the usefulness of global intelligence on terrorism, anticipating the development and growth of ISIS?
Okay. We have been tracking terrorism and organized crime from the very beginning. It started officially in 1996, and the first report came out in 1997. When you look at that, you'll see that we said that terrorism is going to become quite a mess, and same with organized crime, and linked and so forth. That was not a well-accepted notion. There's now a book called Convergence. It came out last year, which documents quite well the interlinking of various terrorist groups and organized crime. We have helped raise the awareness of many policy analysts around the world of the seriousness of this issue. We have people who send us, who I don't even know who they are, they come out of nowhere, send us links to different research and different things, different languages. And so we put those into the scanning system. So the scanning system, so remember the news is automatically comes in from sources. The scanning system is where some human made a judgment. So that scanning system is keeping abreast of what people think is important about those issues. So that's one of the ways that we address that. I would like to, by the way, advertisement for anybody out there, I'd like to work on a study on the public's role on preventing individual terrorists eventually using weapons of mass destruction. If you take some of your technology trends, run them out, you'll see eventually somebody's going to be able to do this. So we got time, so we want to start to think now. It may take a long time, not only come up with the answers, but also how do you train publics, what media. Because if you take a look at the nuclear war standoff, the Cold War, the public had no role other than paying taxes. But in this idea of individual terrorists, the public does have a role, or roles plural. How does that play out differently in different countries around the world? Well, we're in a position, actually, if there are nodes around the world, to actually have a conversation in different cultures and different institutional structures to say, if the public is to improve or to reduce the likelihood of this, what ought the public to do? How does that happen? We can pull that together. So far, Homeland Security has not answered my question, nor has the FBI. And I've given this talk to different intelligence agencies, and everybody goes, yes, we got to do this. But so far, no one's been willing to fund the study. It's an important study to do.
Absolutely. And I think maybe they're just maybe need some examples. So we have another interesting question here going back to the community, the nodes. And the question is, would you recommend for creating, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. What would you recommend for creating collaborative synergy and alliances among futuristic organizations? What would be the payoff of an alliance of top, well-organized future organizations? And I'm presuming, for Philip the Asker, that you mean to come together and become a node, perhaps, or become involved with a project.
Well, we haven't thought about having a futures node as such because most of the people involved in the project are already futurists, but that's a thought to think about. There was an effort about 8 years ago, and actually a website was set up between the World Federation of Future Studies, which tends to be more academic organization of futurists, and the World Future Society, and the Association of Professional Futurists, and the Millennium Project, because we did like the 4 main international future organizations. And there wasn't, World Future Council, I don't know what it's called. But and the Millennium Project said, okay, we'll set up a website, and we did. But then nothing ever happened afterward. So that was one attempt, didn't go anywhere. I would be delighted if all the think tanks in the world would consider collaborating through the collective intelligence system. It's designed to produce that kind of collaboration. We have some think tanks already. IASA is a member, Berlin's a member, the Future Group's a member, and some others. But one way to operationalize that suggestion is just tell it to the think tanks. Check it out, and then we can create collaborations. I mentioned we can create a group on the fly immediately, and we can create Delphi questions on the fly immediately.
Wonderful. So, we're being asked by the audience, and I agree that it's time to, if we could take a look back at the rest of your presentation. We've got another 5 minutes or so for it. So, and I know you have some great examples.
All right, you asked about ISIS and so forth. This was created before ISIS became known. ISIS was the name the Egyptians came up with their collective intelligence system, which was the Integrated Synergistic Information System. So now we call it E-ISIS. Now, you'll notice on the left-hand side, instead of the way we organized the global one, we have it the ministries, because it's the government. The ministries, the Egyptian challenges, Egyptian research. But then it's interoperable with the global stuff, so they can do global local analysis on the system of Egypt. The reason they call it ISIS is because ISIS was the god who took the different parts of the body of her husband and put it back together. Egypt is broken up into all kinds of little fractals, as you know. There's not a common platform to get everything on the table to figure out what to do about the future of Egypt. So this becomes the table upon which Egypt should throw all of its stuff on there and then sort it out. So that's one application there. I'm involved in the European Commission. I'm doing some scenarios for 2050. And one of the thoughts they're going to call it, instead of a European Collective Intelligence System, they're going to call it a European Knowledge Space or something like that. Because the left wing doesn't like the word intelligence, and the right wing doesn't like the word collective. So you see there's a problem. Anyway, the idea is how do you create a system for the whole of Europe response? And how do you create a brain for the region is the idea. So we'll see how that goes. That's one of the recommendations that's going forward in the system now. The people can get a hold of this PowerPoint later. Is that correct?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so I don't need to read this. It says, here's how businesses can use it. Here's how governments can use it. And here's some examples of usefulness. I like the one in the very top there where it says, this is a fabulous tool. Because you don't have to go all over the internet to understand something. It helps, it brings it all together. in a manageable way. When we first started doing this, some of my colleagues were saying, wait a minute, this is going to be a scrambled spaghetti mess. There's no way you could possibly create so much coherence. I think we have. And I invite your audience to play around. You know, it can be improved, of course. As I said, 2 years from now, I expect it to be quite a bit different, I hope. Let's see. And so here's a little bit of Millennium Project graphic there. It shows you where the various nodes around the world. We do have 2 non-geographic ones. One's in arts and media, and one is cyberspace. We may even create a youth one. Just people are thinking about creating a youth node, youth around the world to collaborate on this. So that's it. Maybe there's got a minute or 2 left. I can answer any other questions.
Great. If anybody has any other questions, please write them in. We've got a few moments. I'll have a question for you just to go back to the way corporations can use this.
Yeah.
What do they need to be, what place do they need to be in, and how should they be framing the questions in their own minds in order to present it in an effective way for the system?
Right. Well, corporations are supposed to do strategic planning, and the relationship of futures research or future studies to strategic planning is the same as food to muscle. Futures information is the food that feeds the strategic planning process. They're 2 different things, but one feeds the other. So if you don't have good scanning futures work, you'll make some dumb decisions. The classic is in Washington, D.C. You've got the C&O Canal. C&O Canal was being built while the railroad was being built, the same place. Well, we know that the C&O Canal now is a tourist attraction, and the canal and the railroad is still working. The guys in the canal did not take seriously. They didn't look around. They didn't do their environmental scanning and futures research and forecasting, or they would have given up and just worked on a railroad. So anyway, so one way they can use a system is that they can use it to go through it to see what's relevant to them to change or influence or improve their strategic planning process on a daily basis. As change goes fast, we've got to develop a strategic consciousness in the corporation as well as a strategic plan. Because things happen every day, telephone calls happen. How does this fit? By having a corporation, scanning this and using this from time to time, it helps them see, so what for my organization? And they can throw their questions in and get some free response. So I say that's one of the main reasons is it's an input to the strategic planning process. It also helps them test out products because they can throw out ideas and see how people respond.
Interesting.
Jerry,
go ahead, Flynn. Please go ahead.
Jerry, let me just reflect on the number of years and decades you've been in this, and have really seen the futures world emerge and change through the years. And it's kind of the question that we talked about one time. Looking at the methods and the value of this kind of information and the ability to communicate through the internet, what do you see the next 5-10 years of the future forecasting world looking like as it responds to that demand?
Well, the futures work is becoming increasingly mainstream and normal to the point that people do it, use it, and have no idea the term futurist. The idea of looking ahead is far more used by politicians, not that they do it well, but at least they say it, than ever before. So I think one of the main things is increasing normalization of these things. Like, when Herman Kahn invented scenarios, the idea of best and worst case scenario didn't exist in the mind. The future was controlled by God, for crying out loud. What do you got to do with, what do you humans got to do with all this? So the idea of alternative thinking and alternative scenarios, best case, worst case scenarios now is sort of normal. I mean, you'll hear somebody in a restaurant, talking, well, what's your best case scenario for this? That wasn't existing around. So a lot, and the idea of synergy. I mean, I remember someone saying, we can't use the word synergy, no one's going to know what you're talking about. I was hired by the Quakers in '71, and we had talked about ecology because that's too complex, forget about it. So a lot of these things, the vocabularies, the content, is becoming normalized. The idea that the future is not one set thing, that there's a lot of possibilities out there, has been accepted to a large degree by the world. That impact has been made. We have not yet seen it formalized into things like, for example, the U.S. government does not evaluate a senior executive based upon foresight. For example, There's a guy, Leon Firth, wrote a report called Anticipatory Governance, I think it is. I think your readers should get a hold of it. There's tons of examples about next step for futures research for future-orient the White House and the U.S. government. There are a lot of very, very practical suggestions that should be done. I had a long discussion with Michael Marion, one of the great critics of the field, some years ago. He says, "Oh, futures has gone downhill." Well, yeah. Well, before it was a couple of geniuses in a place that would tell the decision makers what to do, and the public had nothing to say. Now, with the advent of the Committee for the Future opening up with SynCons, the idea of participation, of public participation in thinking about the future, has become something that's real. I think that'll become much more normalized. The idea that we, the people, actually should talk about we, the people's future, and have that through different media, through this sort of a media, in-person media. So the idea of engaging the world into futures thinking is an accelerating trend, in my judgment, and that hopefully become normal as we think of history. We study subjects. We often say, well, this subject was invented by the Romans back and such and such. We teach stuff with the history in the present. We don't teach the future possibilities of it as well. When you study math, one of the things that got me into this stuff when I was in elementary school, I had a math teacher said, not all of math has been invented. That hit me like a brick on the head. What do you mean not all? I mean, physics is physics, math, I mean, algebra is algebra, geometry is geometry. How can there be a future? So the minds of the world is slowly opening up that future is something that has got to be engaged in the present tense in the same way we engage history. Just like we do accounting in a business, we do personnel selection in the business, we ought to do foresight in the business. We're moving in that direction. I think it's becoming more and more normal. I said there's a time in the early days when someone would say, well, who's doing futures research? You could sort of point to people. Now, the range of possibilities, there are thousands and thousands of people doing things now. It's just becoming more normalized.
Thank you. I think we're about to the end. Lamore, do you want to ask one more question, or you want to sort of wrap it up?
Sure. Actually, I have a quick one from the audience. So if we could just keep a quick answer. So what is the split between institutional futures versus the collective intelligence that you see taking place?
Well, institutional futures have to look at the future on behalf of that institution. Collective intelligence we're talking about looks at the larger picture. So there's not a contradiction. It's just that the larger picture is input to institutions.
Understood. Okay. Wonderful. Jerry, Flynn, it's all you.
Well, thank you, Jerry, both for your insight today, but the work you continue to do. This, as we said, has been the spring series of the TechCast Webinar Series. We're in the process of planning of another set of sessions in the fall, and we hope that all of you will be able to join us as we resume in September. Thank you very much for attending, and please fill out the questionnaire that is available to follow up this webinar. Thank you.